When you think of revolutionary games, Half-Life must be one of the first things that come to mind. It's one of, if not the most important first-person shooter in PC gaming history, the grandfather of all modern PC gaming today. Half-Life earned this title for a reason. It contained some of the best world building of any game at the time, and it especially rivals the world building of modern-day gaming juggernauts that we see today. A big part of Half-Life's amazing world building is the biological details on its organisms, details that are surprisingly different from its two successors, Half-Life 2 and Alyx. And of course, there's also Race X, which makes no appearance in any of the future Half-Life games, only in an expansion to the original. So, this video will attempt to look at the organisms in Half-Life 1 and its expansions under a biological lens. I will also isolate these from the Half-Life 2 and Alyx versions, so as to infer the original vision for these organisms. With that being said, the first and only biological faction that we witness in Half-Life 1 is none other than the original Xen. The Xen are a kind of amalgamation of various different organisms that have coalesced on the border world of the same name. All of these organisms are presumably from a variety of different planets and homeworlds which somehow teleported into Xen and populated the surrounding areas. While the exact homeworlds are unknown, we can discern that these homeworlds are located in different dimensions on the other sides of Xen, and may be shared between some of the organisms, such as Vortigaunts, Alien Grunts, and Alien Controllers, and the NIHILANTH as well. Now, let's take a step back. The first Xen organism that we witness in Half-Life, after the Resonance Cascade sequence, is perhaps the most iconic, the Headcrab. The Headcrab makes its first ever appearance following the Resonance Cascade inside of what appears to be a test tube. Although the housing of a Headcrab was clearly not its original purpose, this machinery was likely meant to encapsulate these balls of bright green glowing energy, which likely ended up being used as Xen transport portals for the Headcrabs. Now, the Headcrabs in Half-Life 1 are actually quite odd. You see, in Half-Life 2, their design makes sense in terms of being a kind of parasite, as they have gaping holes in the bottom center of their bodies. However, in the original, they seem to have rows of teeth within their underbelly, as well as visibly exposed intestines of some kind. This indicates a parasitic initiation process which is far more intensive than what you could assume from the models in Half-Life 2. When coupling with the host to become a Headcrab zombie, Headcrabs likely punctured and crushed the victim's head during this process. This may mean that originally, the Headcrabs may have been meant to replace the victim's brain rather than hijack it. The intestine-looking things inside the Headcrab's maw could be the folds of a partially developed brain which can connect to the rest of the host's nervous system. I'll admit, this is a huge stretch, but it's quite the interesting thought experiment, and it may give some insight on the original vision for the biological functions of Half-Life's organisms. Additionally, the Headcrabs appear to have small dots on their front which appear to be eyes. Alongside the Headcrab, there is another Xenian life form which exhibits interesting properties. This is the Barnacle. The Barnacle, designated Cirripedia donaldsonia, named after the first ever human victim of the Barnacle. Now, I covered a lot of the Barnacle's most important aspects in my previous biological video. However, I would like to focus on how this Barnacle differs from the ones in the later Half-Life installments. You see, In Half-Life 1, the Barnacles never eat headcrabs, they only eat humanoid organisms. There are even unused animations for Vortigaunts getting eaten by Barnacles. In the later installments, Barnacles are generally shown to be the natural predators of headcrabs, but maybe originally they were meant to be the natural predators of Vortigaunts or even another humanoid species. It was such an odd Mandela effect for me when I found out that in the original Half-Life, Barnacles didn't eat headcrabs when I could have sworn that they did. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only time that a Barnacle could ever be observed consuming a headcrab is technically in Half-Life Opposing Force with the Barnacle Grappler, a game I never played until the production of this video. In retrospect, this change makes sense, as a humanoid is likely to spot a Barnacle much easier than a blind, chicken-sized parasitoid. An organism that preys on sentient humanoid life forms would need to employ far more advanced tactics than a clearly visible tongue hanging from the ceiling. On that note, Barnacles' tongues appear to be silver in coloration. I assume that this comes from some kind of saliva, or a concept that I explored in my previous video. This color could come from tens of thousands of microscopic hairs, similar to those that a gecko uses to stick to surfaces. Returning to Opposing Force, it gives us one of the most important pieces of Barnacle lore, a hologram of a scientist addressing another named Walter, presumably Walter Bennett, one of the scientists from Half-Life Blue Shift who escaped through the portal alongside Magnuson. He says,
"Ah yes, Walter. We were finally able to successfully detach one of the Barnacle creatures from its point of gestation. As before, we were still only able to coerce the creature into latching onto organic materials. Unfortunately, the administrator has called me down to the Anomalous Materials lab this morning for an important experiment, so I don't have any time to further my analysis. Take specimen number 1176 and log anything else you can find."
The experiment that he has been called to is likely the one which caused the resonance cascade. Now, this recording states that barnacles contain a point of gestation, which is seemingly difficult to remove them from. This means that the barnacle gestates in one location and presumably remains there for its whole life. Additionally, the scientist states that they need to coerce the barnacle into latching onto organic materials. This implies that previously the barnacle would not even attach itself to inanimate objects composed of organic material, and that the barnacle somehow has the ability to differentiate between what is considered prey and what isn't. Now, this also raises another question. How does Adrian Shepard, the main protagonist of Opposing Force, even operate this barnacle? Well, we can assume that it's in some way similar to the Hornet gun that Gordon Freeman comes across. I assume you just put your hand in there and squeeze. The Hornet gun can be presumed to have some kind of trigger in its interior, and as for the barnacle, we can assume that there is some kind of organ that, if squeezed or pulled or something, forces the barnacle to release its tongue. Moving on from the barnacle, the next Xenian organism is one which possesses unique sonic capabilities. This organism is the Houndeye. The Houndeye, designated Sonicanus myriops, is a uniquely tripedal organism that is bright yellow in coloration, with 8 blue stripes across its back. This color scheme may serve to camouflage the Houndeye in the yellowish-greenish environments of the border world, although in Xen, camouflage is likely to be mostly unneeded due to most organisms being blind or limited in sight. The Houndeye's 3 legs are digitigrade, similar to a dog's in appearance, hence the nickname Houndeye. We'll get to the second part of that nickname in just a moment. At the ends of their 2 front feet, there are 2 paw-like structures which have 2 toes each. At the end of their 1 back foot, however, they seem to have a hoof rather than a paw. See, when the Houndeye runs, it seems as if the hoof-like structure allows it to propel itself off the ground as it runs, followed by stabilizing itself with the 2 front legs. This is quite the interesting kind of locomotion, as it essentially allows the same kind of power that the 2 back legs of a traditionally quadruped animal from Earth would provide, without having need for the full 2 legs on the back, and presumably saving the energy that would have otherwise been needed for a 4th leg to be developed. But how effective is this strategy really? Well, let's find out. According to the entity scale of Half-Life 2, one hammer unit is equal to 1 inch, and according to this potentially reliable map on the Garry's Mod Workshop, the height of Odessa Cubbage is roughly 6 feet. Now, the Houndeye can traverse the length of 9 Odessas, roughly 54 feet, in 2 seconds. Now we reduce this to 26 feet in 1 second, then we convert this to miles per hour using Google, where we get about 27 miles per hour. That's just under the speed of the fastest German Shepherd ever recorded, so I'd say that this hoof strategy is very beneficial for the Houndeye. Also, a slight disclaimer, hammer units are very complicated because they're different when measuring from game to game, and they're also different when measuring the model, the map, and the skybox. So maybe take this with a grain of salt, since I couldn't find the exact unit conversion for the gold source engine, hence why I use Gmod. So yeah, just please don't think I'm misinforming you if you found conflicting hammer unit information, because hammer units are conflicting. Now, let's get to the second part of the Houndeye's name. The Houndeye seems to have what you could either call a mouth or one really big eye, I think. Inside this eye, the Houndeye has 16 small pupils within it. These are likely to be compound eyes, which is interesting, but makes sense considering the general low light conditions of Xen. Additionally, you may be wondering how the Houndeye eats if it only has one big conglomerate of eyes. Well, if we look at the inciting incident in Half-Life Blue Shift, we can see that the Houndeye seems to be carnivorous or possibly omnivorous. See, on its underside, it has an opening which seems to be its mouth hole. You can make out a kind of beak on its underside. Now, the main gameplay functionality of the Houndeye is its ability to release a large sonic pulse, which has the ability to cause internal bleeding to its opponents. I honestly have no idea how it does this. It could be an organ within its body or near its eye hole or something, but what I find most interesting about this idea is how it encourages a pack mentality. Multiple Houndeyes working together will be far more tenacious than a single one, and I believe this is because, of course, multiple sounds on top of each other will stack more decibels on top of each other, thus allowing for a higher amount of Houndeyes to be far more lethal when hunting. Overall, the Houndeyes are one of the most interesting organisms of Half-Life, and I dearly hope that they are reintroduced in future installments like HLX or just any future installments really. I'd love to see a Half-Life Alyx style game take on the Houndeye, as I think it'd work really well with VR. The next organism seemingly goes hand in hand with this one, being greatly similar to the Houndeye. This is the Bullsquid. The Bullsquid, designated Gastropolypus toxophlemmata, is a quadrupedal, large-ish organism that is also yellow in coloration, although it is a darker shade than the Houndeye. It has black and orange leopard print from head to tail on its top side, and an almost white, cream-like color on its bottom side. This color scheme probably helps it be hidden in these environments. But again, there's not much need for camouflage in Xen, so take this with a grain of salt. As its name suggests, the Bullsquid is quite muscular across the board, resembling something like early depictions of theropod dinosaurs from Earth. It basically has no fat, as it presumably needs to run around a lot to catch prey. Its legs, the most muscular parts of its body, have 2 sharp claws at each of their ends, and on their major joints they have small spikes extending backwards. I do not know what purpose these spikes serve. They could aid when initiating a tail slap on something like a headcrab, but it's hard to tell if they make any contact. They may be a purposeless relic of previous iterations of their species. The Bullsquid's eyes are seemingly all white, which leads me to believe that they aren't compound eyes, but they aren't anything like what I've seen before. Modern depictions of the Bullsquid do in fact depict them with pupils, but for some odd reason, the original never had any. Now, the main feature of the Bullsquid is of course the squid-like tentacles at its mouth. They are generally bright red in color, however, I assume this is the the blood of its victims, so yeah, the tentacles are probably the same color as the rest of its body. Its carnivorous mouth is at the center of its group of tentacles, with 5 sharp and crooked teeth visible from the outside, and likely much more on the inside. Its diet likely consisted of larger Xen organisms such as Vortigaunts, maybe Vortigaunt zombies, obviously headcrabs, and presumably maybe even more unknown Xen organisms. Interestingly, the Bullsquid doesn't seem to hunt the Houndeye, rather, they seem to engage in a kind of mutualism, a symbiotic relationship where both organisms benefit. The Bullsquid and Houndeye seemingly hunt with each other, which is likely an evolutionarily positive adaptation due to the scarcity of many Xen islands. Now, it may be the case that teleportation and portals may be a part of normal organisms' life and factored into evolution. However, I find it unlikely that normal Xen portals or even structured portals made by the NIHILANTH's army are so accessible to such primitive organisms, which is what I think caused the Bullsquids and Houndeyes to work together. I think what is likely is that they are adapted to survive on medium-sized Xen islands and hunt prey that suddenly appear through the means of randomized portal displacements, if those even happen in the first place, but I believe they are very more common than we think. Overall, the Bullsquid is one of the most interesting organisms that we get to see early in the game. However, it doesn't play as big of a part in the overall game as the next Xen organism, the Vortigaunt. The Vortigaunt, otherwise known as the Alien Slave, designated Xenotherium subservilia, is a humanoid alien which is dark brown in coloration. It follows a hunched-over body structure and has 3 pieces of technology attached to its body. It has 6 red eyes, 1 large primary eye in the center of its head, 1 medium eye above that, and 4 other tiny eyes to the side. Now, I covered a lot of the Vortigaunt's biology in my previous biological video, however, the original Half-Life Vortigaunt has many details that differ from the future installments. Notably, it has several holes littered around its body. This is honestly a mystery to me, and I assume it was a mystery to the developers too, considering that most of them were almost immediately removed in the HD models, and I couldn't find any information about them online. And by Half-Life 2, the holes were completely gone, so I assume they were just forgotten. As for my speculation on these holes, well, my 2 best guesses is that either they are a kind of spiracles, like the little holes that insects from Earth use to breathe, or what I believe to be the more likely answer, this is what they look like when they are starved, as they were enslaved at this time, and they have many different sunken spots on their skin that they don't have in the later games. The Vortigaunts have 2 large hoof-like feet which are shaped into a kind of triangle. Their legs are bony and kind of digitigrade, and their upper body is much bigger aside from its stomach, a further indication of starvation. They have equally skinny arms with 2 claws at each end. Their mouths differ quite a bit from further iterations, being kind of fang-based. This may indicate that originally the Vortigaunt may have had a kind of inverted proboscis, where it would use the fangs to grapple onto food and suck the nutrients out of it. Finally, one of the most important features of the Vortigaunt is the center arm, something which will become very important later. Now, what I find quite interesting about the Vortigaunt is the green metallic attachments on it. Vortigaunts were originally known as alien slaves before we discovered their real names, and these attachments seem to be how they were enslaved in the first place. After all, it would likely be difficult to carry out the enslavement of an organism capable of administering an undodgeable bolt of electricity that does so much damage. Well, you see, I believe that these green attachments create a psychic connection between the Vortigaunts and another alien creature called the Alien Controller, which, as their name suggests, are likely the ones causing the Vortigaunts to be hostile. We see that in the Xen factory, the Vortigaunt slaves won't attack Gordon Freeman for any other reason but self-defense, until an alarm is tripped and the alien controllers show up. When this happens, the Vortigaunts will suddenly attack Gordon using unique electric attacks. But how do they discharge these attacks in the first place? Well, all Vortigaunts are connected by a force called the vortessence, which I spoke on in more detail in my previous biological video. What you need to know is that it links all Vortigaunts together, making them one coterminous being. Now, Vortigaunts can be seen using this force that links them for many other purposes, most notably absolutely beaming Gordon Freeman to death. And the power of this ability is no joke. After all, if the Vortigaunts are a coterminous being, then any given attack must be an effort from at least multiple Vortigaunts' power, let alone all of them. The Vortigaunts are quite interesting organisms, and they are the first of the alien organisms characterized by their central arms. The next of these alien organisms are the alien controllers. The alien controller is a brownish-red alien organism with a noticeably large head. These aliens share much in common with the Vortigaunts. They have the same kind of hoof-looking feet, the same claw shape, albeit with 3 claws instead of 2, and the most identifying factor, the central arm on its torso. Its overall body is thin and lean, with the most significant muscle mass being on its torso. Its arms and legs are very skinny, and its legs are extremely short, likely due to its lack of need for them, opting rather to fly than walk. It wears a reddish loincloth, which I find quite odd as most of the Xen alien species do not have any visible genitalia, although it may be something cultural. As for the alien controller's standout feature, it has a huge brain, which is presumably what gives it all of its psychic powers. This brain is quite odd, as we can see its interior. The bottom half of the brain seems to be standard brain matter, however, the top half has a black and orange spike sticking up from this brain matter. This and many of their other features to me implies that this may just be an artificial or heavily modified species. Now, a small theory here, so take this with a grain of salt, but I think that the alien controllers are a cross between Vortigaunt and Alien Grunt DNA, a species which will go on more in depth later. Now, the similarities here do make some sense. For example, the alien controller has the Grunt's face, with 3 eyes and a vertical mouth. They share many skin deformities with the Vortigaunts. Their third arm is much longer like the Grunts, and their hands are much like the Vortigaunts than the Grunts. The alien controller's primary function seems to be the control of Vortigaunts, with very limited combative functionality. The only thing that really makes them stand out in combat is how hard they are to hit. Otherwise, they are a pretty standard alien. Now, as I speculated, the alien controller seems to be a combination of 2 organisms, the first being the Vortigaunt, and the second being our next organism, the Alien Grunt. The Alien Grunt, designated Xenotherium myrmex, is a hulking brute of an organism which is likely to be nearly 100% muscle mass, or whatever the alien version of muscle mass may be. It has the recurring central arm, although it is the largest of all, barring the NIHILANTH. It has 3 deep red eyes, similar to that of the Vortigaunts in coloration. Its arms are huge, with one hand being some kind of pincer and the other being a hornet gun, which appears to be an attachment to their arm that allows them to fire on enemies with small alien bugs, which have almost no texture. They're kind of just red with little wings or something. Their legs are digitigrade and hoofed, just as the Vortigaunts, and a majority of their body is plated in a dark silver armor, which covers their whole back, but remains open on their front torsos, likely to make space for the third arm. The alien grunt's skin is covered in holes, similar to the skin of the Vortigaunts, although they are much less prominent. Interestingly, the alien grunt seems to be manufactured in a way. We can see factories which seem to be purposed to create these beings in mass and package them in barrels. The manufactured nature of the alien grunt seems to give us pointers to a much more obviously artificially created organism that seems to be made in the image of the alien grunt. This organism is the Gargantua. The Gargantua is what you would get if you just combined 10 alien grunts into one hulking metal mass of a unit. It has huge arms with pincers that house flamethrowers at each end. The bulk of its body is composed of what I can only assume to be pure biomechanical machinery. It has 2 digitigrade legs and 2 appendages, which I can only assume to be either a pair of vestigial legs or some kind of version of the central arms that the rest of the alien species have. It has 1 long red eye, which glows red when an enemy is spotted. The Gargantuas also have 7 sharp teeth, which is interesting as it may indicate that they have some kind of diet while still being a mechanical being, which emphasizes their biomechanical aspect. Interestingly, the Gargantua's legs seem to have a hole in their leg itself. This seems to mimic a common bone structure found in most Earth organisms. The Gargantua's voice is deep and bellowing, which is a great way to intimidate foes. Not much is known about the Gargantua other than it's one of the most dangerous creatures in the roster of Xen organisms. Another organism that is generally mostly known like this is the Tentacle. The Xen Tentacle, designated Hypersuctor sensitiva, is, as its informal name suggests, a tentacle. When viewed at its highest point, it is segmented into 8 body segments, with the 8th being the head, which consists of 1 long spike and 2 smaller ones under it, likely used for feeding. The tentacles can be seen using the large spike on their head to feel around because they have no sense of sight, which is odd because they do have the signature red eyes that the many Xen species have, but they don't seem to work, I guess, as the tentacle can only use its sense of hearing and maybe smell to identify prey. There's a hole on the bottom of the tentacle's head, which is likely the orifice where it hears from, although it could also function as a mouth, but we never see it eating with it. It seems as if the tentacle's most common prey would be the organisms such as the Houndeye or Bullsquid, maybe even bigger prey such as the Gonarch if it keeps coming in such groups of 3. Tentacles have spikes running down along their entire body, which is likely to help with any prey that comes within an area that its main head spike cannot easily reach. Ultimately, we burn the tentacle up before we get to learn anything more about it. However, one organism that we didn't burn up is the Gonarch. The Gonarch is an interesting organism. It's a brownish organism with 4 spike legs and an upper main body similar to the top of an arthropod shell. Its legs have a carapace of hard armor with even more smaller spikes at each end. The Gonarch is most likely located at the tail end of a female headcrab's life cycle, as it has the ability to birth and release what could be hundreds of baby headcrabs. It has 2 primary forms of attack. For one, it uses its sharp spikes to impale any threats to its children that may stand in its way. And as for the other, it has a ranged attack which it fires off some kind of saliva from the top of its arthropod-like shell. While this does sound kind of lackluster, combining this with the constant swarm of baby headcrabs and the absurd amount of health that the Gonarch possesses makes for a formidable, that is to say, annoying, foe. No further comments will be made about the Gonarch. Now that we've gotten a lot of the filler Xen enemies out of the way, let's take a look at the pinnacle of Xen life forms, the NIHILANTH. Okay, I'll be honest, I kind of hate this boss fight. I don't know if that's like a controversial opinion or anything, but I'll be honest, I got stuck on it for like an hour and just gave up. I mean, I realize now what I was doing wrong, I'm not saying it was a bad fight, but I feel like it should have in some way been made clear that I was able to destroy the portals he shot at me. Anyway, with that out of the way, the NIHILANTH is ultimately the leader of all the Xen species with consciousness. The Vortigaunt, Alien Controller, Alien Grunt, and Gargantua are all assumed to be under the NIHILANTH's control. This is no surprise considering the NIHILANTH's capabilities. It is essentially invulnerable when in the presence of its Xen crystals. It can fire purple balls of severely damaging energy from its fingertips, and it can generate Xen portals en masse. Considering the NIHILANTH's very similar appearance to the Alien Controller, it is likely that these abilities are psychokinetic in nature. We even see within the NIHILANTH's head that the same kind of large spike that the Alien Controller has when its head is peeled open is present. Across its body, the NIHILANTH is heavily injured. We see stitches being the only thing holding the skin on its front torso together. Its legs are nearly non-existent, with only small stubs in place of what was previously there. Notably, these stubs appear burnt at their ends, a possible reference to Combine intervention. In place of its lower body, the NIHILANTH has a large cybernetic attachment. While at first it seems like this is what allows it to hover, this is likely not to be the case. It probably flies with its psychokinesis, and this modification to its body seems to support the NIHILANTH's back, working as a base for what appears to be an artificial or repurposed spine on its back. The NIHILANTH's face is no better. Its mouth is shriveled up into a small hole where a coughed up bloodstain can be seen coming out of it. Its eyes are an oddity. They are either extremely dark or not present altogether. Regardless, I doubt it finds any use in them, as it may be likely that the NIHILANTH uses its psychological abilities to aid its perception. One standout feature of the NIHILANTH is the central arm, a recurring feature of most sentient Xen organisms. As most theories for the arm goes, it is either vestigial or an aid in the NIHILANTH's psychic abilities. Xen is composed of countless unique organisms, all of which make up a well-functioning ecosystem. However, there is another line of organisms found in opposing force whose affiliation with Xen is questionable, and these are all the members of Race X. Now, please keep in mind that we don't know much about the creatures of Race X, so these sections will be quite short. Hopefully, we get to see more of these guys in the future Half-Life installments. With that being said, the poster child of Race X is, of course, the Shock Trooper, otherwise known as the off-brand Vortigaunt. It's a very familiar humanoid alien which is muted green in coloration. It follows a hunched over body structure and has 4 arms, the bottom 2 of which it uses to hold another organism called the shock roach as its weapon. On its head, it has 1 large orange eye in the center of its head and 4 large downwards facing spikes surrounding its mouth. It seems not to have any ears, but they may just be hidden in there somewhere. In contrast to the Vortigaunt, the Shock Trooper is very tall and muscular, likely a result of not being a straight-up slave. Its hands are 4-fingered with 3 fingers and 1 thumb on each of the Shock Trooper's 4 hands. The Shock Trooper's feet are parted into 2 segments, one which appears to just be a big toe, and the other which seems to be only present for stabilization. Its legs are digitigrade and extremely skinny, seemingly being literally skin, bones, and muscle for maximum efficiency. The Shock Trooper overall looks very similar to an insect, with several plates of what looks like an exoskeleton across its whole body. Now, the Shock Trooper's weapon of choice is another life form called the Shock Roach, which is a blue insect creature with 6 bright blue eyes, 3 spikes protruding from its head, and 6 small legs, 3 on each side of its thorax. The Shock Roach has the ability to operate independently, but relinquishes this independence when being operated as a weapon by the Shock Trooper. It seems as if the shock roaches are domesticated beings or even artificial life forms made for the purpose of being the weapons of the infantry of Race X. Another weapon that the Shock Trooper will use is the Spore Launcher, which interestingly is an infant version of the Shock Trooper itself. They use this as a grenade launcher by applying some kind of pressure or doing something that will trigger it to fire off an explosive spore. Now, while the Shock Trooper is the base infantry unit of the forces of Race X, another one of the organisms in their ranks exists below this ranking as the Grunts of Race X. These are the Pit Drones. The Pit Drone is an odd member of Race X, which is dark green and brown in coloration. It has 4 limbs, with 2 being digitigrade legs and the other 2 being arms with large, combative, sickle-like spikes at each end. It has no neck or any other kind of separation between its body and head, where it has 2 small, beady eyes and a large, downwards-facing mouth with 4 large and 2 small spikes surrounding it. There are 3 large bony spikes protruding from its back, which seem as if they may be an extension of the Pit Drone's spine. Its feet are quadrilateral in nature, appearing like rectangles, with 3 spikes serving as toes on the front of each foot, and 1 spike on the back to support its heels. My least favorite part of the Pit Drone is definitely its forehead, or at least that's what I'd call it, I guess. It's composed of 6 fleshy holes with spikes sticking out of them, which is very uncomfortable to look at. These spikes are their primary form of offense. They fire them at their opponents and can regenerate them with haste when in a tight battle. While alone, the Pit Drone is nothing more than a nuisance. In numbers, they can be one of the most punishing enemies to fight against. 1 small spike at a time is not too big of a deal, but a volley of endless spikes constantly pelting you can tear down your health very quickly. Now, if the Pit Drone is the grunt body shields of Race X and the Shock Troopers are the infantry, this next organism would play the role of a juggernaut, and this organism is the Voltigore. The Voltigore is a very large, insect-like creature about the size of a small car. It's kind of a muted orange in coloration with purple stripes on its back. It's a quadruped with 4 legs with spikes at their ends. Its arms are for the most part standard, but they don't have hands at their ends and they only have downward-facing spikes. They also have 1 long tail, which they basically don't use. The Voltigore seems to be blind, with its head having nothing but 2 large flexible mandibles and 3 small hair-like appendages. I'll be honest here, the Voltigore is extremely annoying. I don't know if it was just bad level design or bad enemy design, but it was very hard to deal with. Not only can it deal insane damage with its claws and overall strength, but it can also shoot some kind of purple energy ball, which also deals an insane amount of damage. Now, most of this transpired at a location in the Black Mesa facility, which seemed to serve as their nest, which is interesting as it points toward the Voltigores having a hive mentality. We even see baby Voltigores in the area. They seem to be a very prolific species, considering that baby Voltigores in a nest are already able to be seen mere hours following the resonance cascade. Overall, the Voltigore is an interesting, insect-like species that is surprisingly strong. But if we want to go another step up in terms of strength, then we want to talk about the pit worm. The pitworm is a massive, brownish-orange arthropod that shares a significant resemblance with centipedes. They have legs running along the entirety of the part of their body that we can see, and presumably, the rest of their body is also lined with these short spike legs. On the uppermost part of their body, the pitworm has 4 large limbs with spikes at their ends. These are used combatively, and are likely used for tunneling through various materials as well. The part of its body that you could call its face has 1 huge green eye with a black pupil in the center. This eye doubles as an offensive trait, as it can be seen firing a giant laser beam from it. Aside from that, it has 2 large pincers and a downward-facing mouth with 12 visible teeth. On its back and over all its body, it has a thick exoskeleton which cannot be penetrated by low or standard calibers of bullets, which is likely what ultimately allowed it to overpower the squad of HECU combatants. Additionally, based on this creature's general appearance and the singular center eye, we can assume that the pitworm is in some way related to the shock trooper, as they do somewhat share a resemblance. Overall, the pitworm is a generally interesting organism, and it was a great boss to fight, but the pitworm isn't the final boss of Race X. In fact, it may as well be a mini-boss compared to our next organism, the Gene Worm. In keeping with the theme of worms and insects in Race X, the Gene Worm is a giant worm that comes out of a portal and presumably wants to initiate a little takeover of their own. But just as Gordon Freeman stopped the NIHILANTH, Shepard dispatches this worm with great ease. The Gene Worm itself is very green in coloration, almost making it look a lot like the Xen Tentacle. It also has bright orange eyes, possibly linking them with the shock troopers. The Gene Worm has a slew of tentacles, which we can assume span across its entire body beyond the portal. At the ends of a majority of its tentacles are large dark spikes, and similarly, these spikes are at the ends of their mandibles. Its top half is covered in a very thick armor which crescendos at the front of the Gene Worm's body as a long spike. Its bottom half has two large muscular tentacles without spikes at their ends, which it likely uses to maneuver in its homeworld. Beyond its mandibles is a small proboscis-like appendage with 4 spikes surrounding it. These are most likely used to help with positioning when it feeds. Additionally, the Gene Worm has the ability to open its chest and fire off a portal, which summons a single shock trooper to aid it, which is a surprisingly small amount, which led to this fight feeling much easier than I presumed it would be. Regardless, the Gene Worm is the pinnacle of Race X evolution, and is still the most formidable foe in their ranks. Race X is one of the most elusive species in the Half-Life universe, with them being confined to an expansion of the universe rather than to a mainline title, so there's a lot of varying data regarding them, which is why I stuck to basic data and connections for this part rather than doing a deep dive into what's in the wiki. I do, however, have a particular video regarding Race X that I will make in the coming future. Now, with that out of the way, it's now time for the Biological Half-Life Lightning Round, just a quick, hopefully 1-minute barrage of creatures that didn't end up getting a segment of their own.
3, 2, 1, go!
Snarks, little red guys who come in hives. They are weaponized by Gordon Freeman. One appears in Half-Life Alyx and we don't see much of them otherwise. Chumtoads, they appear in Blue Shift as a fun Easter egg and are just purple frogs with layers. Boids, literally just polygon birds. Leeches, literally just leeches. Xen funguses, just a bunch of fungus. I covered them in my Alyx video where they are much better detailed. Light stalks, Xen creatures that emit light and can autonomously hide from external organisms, and that's about it. Xen trees, just giant curved spikes that stab any organism stupid enough to get near the giant curved spike. Race X sprites, literally just flying balls of light. I have no idea what these things do, but they're distinguished as a part of Race X in the Half-Life wiki. Ichthyosaur, honestly I forgot to talk about this guy, but he's not really a big deal because he's just a big fish anyway, so it's not a big deal. And so, this analysis finally comes to an end. With 17 species covered, this was definitely my longest biological analysis thus far. So please, keep in mind, there are a lot of things that I missed, like the Bullsquid firing some kind of acid at the player, and the red bombs that the Gargantua shoots, and probably many more small things like that. So, I only sought to cover all the general bases without going into so much detail. With that being said, if you've made it this far and you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel for more analysis like this. I'm planning on branching out and making analysis of games like Subnautica and Halo, and in particular one game which you just might have heard of. So, with that being said, thanks for watching, and goodbye.